In this video, we're going to show you a new type of layer called an adjustment layer and some of the things you can do with adjustment layers. It's still part of our non-destructive workflow. So as we've done in previous examples where we're retouching on a new layer, we're going to create adjustment layers to modify the look of our image. And with our masking capabilities, we'll also be able to do that selectively, so we're not editing the entire image with one adjustment. So under the layer menu, I can say layer, new adjustment layer, and then I can pick which one I want. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. I would definitely recommend experimenting with some of these. These are the most useful ones where you're going to adjust, the brightness of the image, the contrast, the overall exposure, and as it says here, you can do all that with one curve adjustment, or you can experiment. I do recommend not having too many adjustment layers to do the same thing. So try to minimize that, but while you're learning, you may have more adjustment layers than you need. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a curves adjustment layer because I'm going to adjust the image overall first. So click on curves and click OK. And now here are my curve properties. If for some reason you don't see that, you just double click on this little icon right here, double click, and your properties will open up. This is a histogram of the values in this image. So the black point here, if I drag it in, this makes it darker and clips it off. White point on the lower right hand side. And so these are the distribution of values in your image. So if I want to lighten the image, I push up on the curve. And you can see the scale on the left-hand side. It's dark to light, so whenever I push up, it gets lighter. Whenever I pull down, it gets darker. So this little point here corresponds to some value in the shadow area. This is the midtones and the highlights. So you can go in and really affect the change of your image. Now this doesn't look good. I just want to push up on this a little bit, open up the shadows just a bit. And if you wanted to, you can turn the layer off. It's just like another layer. I can turn it on and off. You can see the adjustment here. And again, we have blending modes and opacity, so if you really needed to dial that effect back a little bit, you can change the opacity. So it works just like any other layer. The only difference is that you can't paint on the adjustment, but you can paint on the mask, which we'll get to here in a minute. So here's an adjustment that I made. It looks all right. So I'm just going to click that off. And so if that was the look you were going for, you're done. Okay, so you have your original layer unmodified, but visually modified with an adjustment layer. Let's go ahead and add another layer here, or an adjustment layer. So again, multiple ways to do the same thing. The first time we went to layer, new adjustment layer. This time I'm going to go down here and go in this panel right here. I'm going to click this, and it's mine is going off screen. So here it should pop up, but you won't be able to see it because mine is the way my screen is set up. It's popping off the bottom. So up here we can do the same thing. So these are our adjustment layers as well in the adjustments panel. And so here you just roll over to see which one you want to use, color filter, and so on. I'm going to go and create down here here it goes. Maybe you can see that. What do I want to do? I'm going to make a black and white mask. Not mask, adjustment. So when you create an adjustment layer, black and white, again, turning it on and off, you can convert your image to black and white. And click Auto here to see what it thinks. And just like with Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, when you're converting, you can shift these values left and right to kind of dial in, the way the image looks. All right, darken it up a bit maybe. Cool. So again, turning it on and off, lowering the opacity to give you kind of that semi-faded look if you'd like. But one of the beauties of using an adjustment layer, it automatically comes with a layer mask. So you do not have to add a layer mask to an adjustment layer. A layer mask comes with an adjustment layer by default. Again, with the mask, you're going to paint with black or white paint, depending on whether you want to show what's on the layer or hide what's on the layer. So in this case, let's say we wanted this all to be black and white, except for the color of her eye. Well, right now, the black and white adjustment layer is affecting the entire layer. If we want to hide that effect, hide the black and white transition, and effect, we would use black paint to hide that. So I'm going to go over here, switch back to black paint, and if you're not sure if it's black or white, I highly recommend hitting the letter D. That's the default for foreground and background as black and white. So D, you hit that and it goes black and white. Sometimes, I'm going to show you here why I recommend that. So that is it could look, this foreground could look white, but it's not really. So if I hit D, it goes to white, and we'll make sure that it's black and white. As you get better with this, you paint with a gray or something else other than black and white, but for right now, stick with black and white. So now I want to hide this effect, and I want to just color her eye. So I'm going to switch to black. I'm going to get a brush that's about the same size. That's a little too big, so I'm using my left bracket to make it bigger or smaller. The brush softness is too soft, so let's make it, let's go up to 90%. I just wanted it to be a little on the soft side, so again, I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger. That's too big, it's pretty close. So here I'm going to go ahead and just click. I'm just clicking a couple times. I can zoom in a little bit so I can see a little bit better. So maybe 260. Again, you can try painting this, moving the mouse, but personally I find it easier to try to get a brush that's about the same size, and all I have to do is click, and I don't have to worry about, trying to be super accurate with the brush. So I'm just kind of wiggle this around a little bit, and that should be pretty good. Make the brush a little softer, a little bit smaller. All right, cool. So I'm just trying to get along, over to the edges here a bit. So what I'm doing is I'm hiding that effect. And all it's doing is showing the layer below it. So if I turn this off, you can see the layer below it is showing through. Now, obviously with my round brush, I needed to get rid of this part, so that's where we switch back to white paint. Make my brush smaller with the left bracket key. And all I'm going to do is paint along the edge here and try to dial that in. So if it's a really distinct hard edge, you want a brush that's fairly hard. If it's a soft edge, you want a soft brush, and if it's really fuzzy on the edges, you definitely want to use a hardness setting of 0 or something very low. So now what we've basically done was we colorized her eyes with a natural color, or in essence we've stripped away the color from her face and just left the color of her eye, which is a interesting effect in itself. Let's go back to this image here. I think we've used this before. Kind of the same idea. Let's go ahead and create a black and white adjustment layer. And you can use this technique to isolate certain things if you want to call attention to something. So like on this one, kind of like we did with the last one, what I'm going to do is get my brush, and again, I'm going to use black paint to hide that effect. Let me lower the, or increase the hardness because it's a really defined shape. I'm going to get that a little bit smaller. So what I'm doing here is, if the brush, it's hard to see the brush, it's just around the stone color, so that's probably good. But I can also go a little bit wider, give it my best guess here, and bring in the gold back into the surrounding of the stone. All right. So now we've brought that back in. If you wanted to, take your time, we can go in, get a smaller brush, Again, I'm using black paint on this to bring this effect, or actually removing the effect to show the original back through. Sometimes, like on this here, you can try to go around, or what I find easier is I'll just go and take the whole deal out, and then I will make my brush smaller and get in here and use white paint now to show the effect again. Now I'll show you some selection techniques as we go through this that will make this even easier, this whole process. But at least this might give you a whole new respect for how this kind of thing is done. And it does take time. To get good results, it definitely takes a bit of time. Okay, so using an adjustment layer, creating, with black and white adjustment here, we can use any of the other adjustment layers here. So I'm going to take, again, I use curves as my usual go-to. So let's do a curves adjustment. I'm just going to darken the whole thing for right now. Okay, I can even push down on this and see how the image gets kind of gray, because you're pushing the white down to more of a gray value with this curves adjustment. But again, with the adjustment layer, we have a layer mask that we can use. So again, we take our paintbrush and we wanted to kind of bring a lot of this back, but just kind of have it get darker up towards the top. We have a couple of different ways to do this. Let's go ahead and give you the simplest way. I'm going to use the gradient tool here. You can go in and paint it, but it might be a little irregular. But if you want it just to be a blend, I'm going to use the gradient tool. Shortcut is the G. Look at the options up at the top here. We have linear gradient, radial, and so on. I'm going to use a linear gradient. You click on this little arrow here, and you get foreground to background, foreground to transparent, again, foreground to background, and you have some presets here. So again, if I have black and white, you can kind of guess what's going to happen. Basically, the way this works is it's going to blend from black to white equally in line or in linear fashion. The black is going to hide, the white is going to show, and anything in between is going to be partially shown through. So if it's lighter, it's going to show more. If it's darker, it's going to show less. So if I take this gradient tool, and let's say I start from the bottom up, it's going to go from black all the way up to white. So all we did was we blended this curves adjustment from 100% down to 0. Now you can start anywhere, so if I wanted to go over this again and start here, wherever I start is going to go black. So all this area down here is black, and it fades up to white. If we look at the mask, here's what our mask looks like. So if I went, started even higher, like let's say here, up, anything below my starting point will go black. Anything above my end point will go white. So you can see it blends just from here to here. Looking at our layer now, it's just darkening the top part. So you get this kind of almost natural light fall off, that kind of effect on this adjustment layer. So basically, adjustment layers automatically come with layer masks, and you can selectively apply effects to your image. Now if we wanted to take this one step further and kind of add a tint to the whole thing, we could, and that's just that could be just a regular layer. So here I would go in, and here's another type of layer. I'll show you real quick. Is a solid color layer. Now we go in and pick the color. Say we do like a little sepia effect. Click OK. Now, okay, we'll use the blending mode. Let's go to color here, if I can get to it. It's not my screen, but it's showing up as color. And then again with the opacity change. And again, if we wanted to, we can bring this stone out and lower that even more. Using our paintbrush right here. Click on the mask, layer mask, and a bigger brush with, you guessed it, black paint will show us that stone right through. So it's hiding that sepia effect. Okay. So adjustment layers automatically come with layer masks. With a layer mask, you use white paint to show what's on that layer and black paint to hide what's on that layer. I hope that makes sense to you. We'll have other videos that show more uses of adjustment layers and layer masks coming up.